I mean, let's just go ahead and dive right into it as we had some good college football games over the course of this past weekend. Ole Miss and Tulane, Texas and Alabama was a really good game as well. Shoot, even if you want to look into the non-top 25 matchups, Oregon and Texas Tech, for example, was really good. Wisconsin got upset by Washington State. So, a little bit of movement, and rightfully so, in that AP poll. What does the Any Given Saturday poll, what does the computer model think of this? So let's not waste any more time with that. Let's go ahead and jump right into that. Jumping into the top 25. Now, in this Any Given Saturday top 25, let me just say this. Not as many new teams entering the top 25 as what we saw in the AP poll that was released on Sunday during the 1 o'clock games for the NFL, for those of you that do happen to follow the NFL as well. Both of those teams will show up here initially on your screen right now. We got 21 through 25. We do have a couple of teams in here. Iowa, they had a pretty convincing win against Iowa State. Still have some concerns about their offense, but we do know that Iowa has one of the best defenses in the entire country. I don't think anyone is disputing that. I do have them back into the top 25. Had them ranked, I believe, in week number 1 going into the season. But yeah, Iowa fell out during week 2. They are back once again. They are remaking an appearance in here at number 24 in the country. And then we have another team that happens to be entering in the top 25 as well. We got the Auburn Tigers. Yes, they are going to go ahead and make an appearance here. Auburn comes in ranked number 21 in the country. They perform above expectations against UMass. UMass, maybe they might be one of the worst teams in college football, but they're certainly more exciting to watch than last year, those of you that have actually had time to watch UMass. And then Auburn went across the country, took on the Bears of California, and listen, it was a defensive-minded battle, but what this game tells me is that Auburn knows how to win in multiple ways. And, if you're an Auburn fan, I think that's the best that you can hope for. Auburn got a nice win, and because of that, they're in this top 25 for the very first time. The model does have them as the number 21 team in the country. Now, before I go into this top 25 poll for the Any Given Saturday, I do want to point out that these are not rankings. These are power ratings. And what these power ratings are, this is just simply to determine if these two teams would play right now, playing today, who would be favored over whom in a neutral site field. Now, we do have more data as we are a few weeks into the college football season, but still a lot of the preseason still being identified, as many teams have played only a couple of games at most. It's still very early on in the season. So that caveat is out of the way. We'll jump into the rest of the top 25 because of that. UCLA in at number 20 in the country. UCLA finally getting ranked in the AP poll, but for those of you that have been following this show for quite some time, we have had UCLA ranked since the very beginning. We were high on what Chip Kelly has going on over here in UCLA. Maybe the little brother in Los Angeles right now because of what the Trojans are doing, but UCLA is still a very good football team. They're here in the top 20. And then I have Miami moving up to number 17 in the country in my power ratings model. Now, I did not get a chance to preview this game. There was going to be a second show last week, and unfortunately, life does happen. And because life does happen, we weren't able to get that second show up in a timely manner without rushing in. And I don't want to send a bad product over in your directions, but say that because we were going to preview that Miami and Texas A&M game. The model actually did have Miami winning. And turns out the model was right. So, got to give a pat to the back to the old model right there. They're up at number 17 in the country. And then Oregon, they survived a dogfight against Texas Tech. They're chilling at number 16 right now. Now, conversely, we go into the top 15 and what we have here. And we have the team that fell the most in this Any Given Saturday power rating poll without actually falling out of the top 25. Alabama was ranked number 2 in the country last week, but as you may know, they did end up losing to Texas at home. And, in the fashion that Alabama lost to, the poll does not believe in the in what it used to be, in what Alabama used to mean and used to represent. Certainly some concerns about James Milroe. We'll dive into this later on in the pod when we talk about the Texas Alabama game specifically, but I do have Alabama falling minus 10 spots. Now, rounding out the this 11 through 15, I got Tennessee right above them. They didn't look as impressive as I thought they were going to look versus Austin Peay down the FCS level, but a win is a win. I'm not going to penalize a team for beating an FCS squad. Now, if they lost, that's a different story. And we did have 3 FCS teams beat an FBS program last weekend, but Tennessee was not one of them. Now we go into the top 10 real fast. Texas was my biggest riser, of course. I don't think anyone is surprised by that. I moved them up 5 spots. They were at number 14 in the country. Now they're up to number 9 based off of their performance this past weekend. Now, why I don't have them up over the teams that are ahead of the other 3 teams listed, and this is what the model thinks. For Utah, we still haven't seen what Cam Rising can do with this offense, and even with a backup quarterback in the game, they still find a way to beat Florida, and then they went on the road to take on Baylor, which, yes, they lost to Texas State, and it was embarrassing, but Baylor was in wounded animal mode, and they still almost found a way to win that game. So Utah, very quality football program. I have them at number 8. Penn State at 7. I think Drew Allar could very well be the truth. I think he's looked very good thus far. And then Oklahoma. They've won in multiple ways in both of the games that they played versus Arkansas State and SMU. They have covered both of their games. Oklahoma, of course, dog walking Arkansas State to oblivion, almost made Butch Jones cry. That is a special thing to do. And then SMU, they shut down SMU's offense. I thought it was going to be one of those games where that game was going into the 70s in terms of total points scored between the two teams. Wasn't remotely close. Oklahoma was still able to cover. So for now, the commuter model does have Oklahoma at number 6 in the country. Finally, we have our top 5. We do have a new number 1 team in the country, but it's not who I think was going to be. Florida State is my new number 1 team in the country, and according to the Any Given Saturday computer model, Florida State has looked extremely scary. So is the other 2 teams on this list, right? So Florida State, they have really came out and showed very early that they are a team to be reckoned with. Florida State, of course, sending a massive message to LSU in that neutral site game in week number 1. But secondarily, what we've also have seen as well is, in that follow-up game against Southern Miss, they didn't have that letdown. Sometimes when you have teams that pull off an emotional win like Florida State did in week number 1, we sometimes see that letdown, and that just didn't happen. They dominated Southern Miss from the start, won 66-13, and it's a scary football team. It is an extraordinarily scary football team right now, and so are the other 2 teams that are in this top 5. USC, I think, is starting to figure things out on defense. Stanford, couldn't really find a way to score even in the garbage time. They only get 10 on the USC Trojans. We all know what Caleb Williams can do. I'm not going to dive into too deep to that. We know Caleb Williams is certified him. And then Notre Dame. Notre Dame, I feel like this is a different team from last year. I felt this way right after the Navy game, and I feel like that was confirmed to a degree in that matchup against North Carolina State. Had to traverse through some weather delays, a lot of bad weather from the Carolinas up to the northeastern part of the country. One game in which was delayed 6 hours. So you hate to see that. Notre Dame is number 3 in the country. And as for Washington and Georgia, it's not that I think less of those 2 teams. Actually, they are roughly the same rating as they were last week. It's just Florida State, USC, Notre Dame, those types of teams, they continue to look even more impressive. And that just goes to how much more highly I think of those 2 teams instead of concerns that I may have for Washington and Georgia. So that is my Any Given Saturday top 25. Of course, one thing that I do like about this model that we've built, and it's going to get better as we are presented with more information, is that it does tend to react more like honey instead of water. We're not going to freak out and put a team suddenly in the top 25 that would have no business being in there prior to a big game, right? So that's what I really like this model. It just gives a good idea of who would be favored over whom if these two teams played today. So that's going to round things up for the Any Given Saturday top 25. Only a couple of new teams in. Texas A&M, they're out. They are no longer in there. Can't remember exactly who the other team was that fell out of the top 25. I'm going to see if I can find my list real quick to see if I can find who I'm looking for. Oh, yeah, Wisconsin also fell out after their loss to Washington State. Had the over on them, and it fell just short. If only Wisconsin made that 2-point conversion. We'll cry through the pain. It is what it is.